We all come in with our own perspectives, our own experiences of the world, our own, just the way that we have everything that's happened to us. It all funnels into our perspective. And everybody responds to tinnitus differently. So there's no two experiences that are identical. People have a huge gamut that they run through. So some people will experience that ringing in their ears as a whatever, and they put it in the back of their mind. It's just part of the background of life, not a big deal, no issue. Other people, unfortunately, are at the opposite end of the spectrum. And for those people, they can feel suicidal as a result. Unpopular opinion here, you just have to live with it is a terrible thing to say to a patient who is struggling with this. It's not completely wrong, though. I had a gentleman that I saw, this is before I even created this program. He was a very cool guy, practicing Buddhist. He was also a therapist. He comes in and he looks at me and he goes, I have to tell you, I am so angry right now. Ultimately, we walked through where he was emotionally, how he had gotten there. I think he needed to unload a little bit of that. Our brains make up all sorts of stories all the time, and our brains are fabulous storytellers, but we don't have to believe everything we think. I just like my motto, just do it scared. Do it anyway.
Welcome to the Ravi Athale Perspective. I'm Ravi Athale, and if you're watching this for the first time, well, hit that subscribe button right now. My guest today has spent over 20 years working with people who have been told by doctors to just get used to. And she decided that wasn't good enough. So she built a program to actually give people the tools to change how they respond. She's a certified coach and audiologist, a tinnitus specialist, and the creator of the SoundShift program. This conversation will completely change how you think about sound, stress, and the human brain. Emily, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Ravi. I appreciate it.
Pleasure is mine, Emily. So, Emily, for listeners who are meeting you for the very first time, how would you describe what you do in just one sentence or a couple of sentences?
I help people reconnect to the world through sound.
Okay. I love that. One sentence, but there is a whole world in it. Let's unpack that world, Emily.
Yeah.
You wear two hats. You being audiologist and a coach. Which identity feels most like you right now?
I would say I am very much a blending of the two. I have been an audiologist. An audiologist is a person, because a lot of people don't know what an audiologist is. I work with the hearing impaired. So I specialize in the diagnosis and treatment of hearing loss. And one of my special areas of passion is working with people who struggle with the ringing in their ears. A lot of people say tinnitus. I say tinnitus. For some people, the impact of that in their lives can be really challenging. And when I was working clinically, I didn't always have the right skill set, the right tools, and the time, honestly, to give patients what I felt like they needed. And so I took a step back from 20 plus years of clinical work and became a certified coach, because it didn't make sense for me to go back to school for another degree. And it gave me a way to teach and share and support people in building skills of emotional regulation that are needed to manage their tinnitus experience, to build skills around cognitive flexibility and thinking about things in a different way. And it's been interesting as I've been digging my hands and feet into this stuff so much more. I use a lot of the skills myself, and I have noticed just in my general well-being and improvement in day-to-day life and quality of life.
That is
really
so
lovely.
fascinating, because most people would assume those two things are completely separate, but I reckon you've made them one thing. What does a typical week look like for you in Denver?
Right now, it's a lot of building and finishing out the program that I've created. So it's a lot of content creation. It's a lot of editing videos. It's a lot of writing. It's a lot of pulling information from all the little disparate places that I've been gathering it for the past decade, because this is a long time coming. And I was finally brave enough to take the plunge. And it's been fun pulling it all together and seeing it really become a lot more cohesive than what I had in my head initially. So
Fair
most
enough.
days it's content creation and editing and, videotaping, editing,
And who does it?
right, all of it.
Oh, okay. So you're wearing so many hats at the same time.
I'm learning that there's a whole lot I didn't know that I didn't know. So it's been
Okay.
interesting.
Fair enough. You've been in audiology and coaching for more than 20 years. What keeps you
Mhm.
energized after all this time?
The advice my dad gave me growing up was to pick a job you do if you weren't going to get paid. So that was the mindset that I went into when figuring out what I wanted to be when I grew up. I am hearing impaired myself, so I have a very deep understanding of what it is like to walk the world when you don't hear and communicate as easily as everybody else.
Oh, really? And since when?
5.
All right. So are you wearing it right now?
No, because I have my headset on, but most of the time my hearing aids are in my ears. It's typical in the morning for me to put my hearing aids on, put my glasses on almost first thing out of bed.
So can I say this is what made you what you are right now? You always wanted to help someone having hearing
Sort of. I've always
disability?
wanted to help people. That's been a pretty consistent thing.
Okay.
But I started college as a lighting design major for theater.
Mm-hmm.
And I took a class in communication disorders, and it was the first class that I ever took that I wanted to learn more. And I'm a very innately curious person. I love to learn. I could stay in school forever, which is a good and a bad thing because there's always more to learn. There's always people smarter than you. And I want to go find those people and learn from those people. I love sharing information. I love sharing ideas. And that for me has also been what's been really fun about creating this program and connecting with people through LinkedIn and through Facebook and Instagram and being able to share that information. But it was the first time I wanted to learn more than what was being taught. And the fact that I get to help people improve the quality of their life, the fact that I am able to help them connect to other
Okay.
people to perform better in their job.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when somebody has hearing loss, they get misinterpreted as a lot of things that they're not. There are people who, especially as they're younger, they may get overlooked for promotions because people assume they're harder to work with. They're not as friendly because they didn't hear you say hello, so they didn't say anything back. So it looks like they're being rude. They may ask for clarification more often because they didn't quite catch what was being said. So it looks like maybe you're not as bright or smart as you are. So they can easily get overlooked for promotions or new opportunities because people have these preconceived notions of them that aren't actually true. They're just related to the hearing loss.
Preconceived ideas. That is what it is.
Oh, and hearing loss, because it's so invisible, tinnitus is as well, but hearing loss is so invisible, you just don't know.
Yep. So what's one thing people are almost always surprised to learn about you when they first meet you?
I don't know what people are surprised when they first meet me about.
Do they come to know that you've got a hearing disability?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
super upfront with people about
All
it.
right.
And I think you do have to be your own advocate. I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of. I've been using hearing aids since I was 5. A hearing aid will never make your hearing quote unquote normal, but
Mm-hmm.
it makes quality of life better. And that is the goal. And in very much all honesty, a device is as good as the person doing the work who's fitting it. Because there are things that they need to be doing that are part of best practices that unfortunately aren't as consistent as they should be through our industry. But even with all of that, I think one thing that surprises a lot of people that they forget is that your ears are connected to your brain.
That's
We
right.
hear with our ears, we listen with our brain. And they forget that when the ear doesn't send that full picture of information upstairs, the brain isn't getting all the information it's supposed to have. And because hearing loss can be so gradual over so many years, people figure out ways to compensate. They figure out ways to work around it. And that puts a tremendous amount of strain on the cognitive system. And there's a big correlation between untreated hearing loss and increases in cognitive decline. It doesn't cause it, but there's a high correlation between the two. It's one
That's
of the
right.
reasons I wear my hearing aids every day, all day. I don't
On
care
you.
what you spent on them. They don't work unless they go in your ears.
Good on you. So I think this is for viewers, those who are going to watch this podcast or listen to it. Drop what surprised you about Emily in the comments below. Okay. Emily, your mantra for the past 18 months has been done is better than perfect. and do it scared.
Always.
What did those come from?
Mhm. It is really difficult as doing a podcast, putting yourself out there. When you put yourself out there, you run the risk of failing. You run the risk of
Yes,
succeeding and all of the things that go along with that. You have to stand up and really own your ideas.
that's right.
That's not a comfortable thing to do, to defend your ideas and know in your heart that what you're doing is beneficial to other people. It's scary to be the man in the ring
It
as
is.
opposed. And so do it scared for me is I'm very green when it comes to starting a business, starting content creation, all of it. I'm very green, but I'm doing it anyway. Is it
That's how it
perfect?
is.
No, but I'm putting it out there anyway. Are there going to be typos? Are there going to be things where I stumble over my words? Absolutely. But those are
Everyone
all
does
things I
it.
can learn and get better at. But one of the things I think has been the benefit of getting out of my comfort zone is you learn who you are. You learn what makes you tick.
I think
And
I
you
think
learn to trust
there's
yourself a lot
yeah.
more.
I think there's always room for improvisation. There's always a learning curve. Doesn't matter what you do.
Mhm.
You could just be a better version of yourself every day, every week, every month, every year, and just try to
Yeah.
give your best. That is what you could do. Now, Emily, you have built a career around one condition that most people either don't know about or they know someone who has it and has no idea what to do. Let's go there. Tinnitus.
Yes.
That is what I want to talk about, Emily. If you ever had the ringing in your ears, even for a few seconds after a loud concert, this next part is for you because of millions of people that ringing never stops. For tinnitus, Emily, for anyone who has never experienced tinnitus, how would you describe what it actually feels like to live with day to day? You have very brief told what tinnitus is, but how does it to live with it every day for a person who is
It's
experiencing it?
we all come in with our own perspectives, our own experiences of the world, everything that's happened to us. It all funnels into our perspective. And everybody responds to tinnitus differently. So there's no two experiences that are identical. People have a huge gamut that they kind of run through. So some people will experience that ringing in their ears as a whatever, and they put it in the back of their mind. It's just part of the background of life, not a big deal, no issue. Other people, unfortunately, are at the opposite end of the spectrum. And for those people, they can feel suicidal as a result. And those people absolutely must be under the care of somebody who is in the mental health profession,
Okay.
getting those services, getting the medication, getting that support, because that is not a place I ever want a human being to be. That's not a happy place. A lot of people fall in kind of this mild to moderate range where it is, well, that's sort of annoying and I don't want to listen to that. Or there may be responses of, I don't understand this. What is it? Am I always going to live with this? The responses can be anything from mild annoyance to fear, anger, frustration, anxiety, depression. And for some people, it can really overtake a lot of their life. They feel like they can't participate in things, they feel like it inhibits their ability to enjoy the things that they want to enjoy. But everybody
You,
is different. So there's no one singular thing that I would say defines everybody with the ringing in their ears. Ringing
you,
in their ears, when I think about tinnitus, it's not those little transient kinds of sounds that you might experience. You know, your ear goes numb for a second and you
yeah,
hear ringing for 30 seconds and it goes away. That's
yeah.
more of a transient sound. That's not true tinnitus. True tinnitus is that chronic ongoing sound that does not have an external source.
How do you get tinnitus? Is by birth or it could happen to anyone anytime?
It is most highly correlated with hearing loss. So if you're experiencing ringing in your ears, please go get your hearing checked. A lot of damage can happen in the ear long before it actually shows up on a hearing test in the booth. So it's important that if you do have hearing loss, as most people with tinnitus do, to have that treated, to be using hearing aids. It's one of the most effective things that we can do. And the reason for that is because it improves the difference, the contrast difference between the silence and the world is noisy. there's always sound going on. And unlike our eyes, where we can close them and we don't see anything, our ears on 24/7, 365. There's no ear lid, so to speak. And when you have hearing loss, we want to make sure that we're treating it so that we're bringing that full picture of sound into your world. For some people, that's enough to mitigate the hearing of the tinnitus and settling that nervous system response. The nervous system response is, I think, where the bigger problem comes and where we don't offer enough support. And that is learning, how do I manage how this feels when it's spiking? What does that mean? What do I do when I'm having trouble sleeping? And helping people with the skills and the knowledge that there are things they can do and there are ways that we can manage it. Are any of them a magic wand and a pill? No. But that doesn't mean there's no help. That doesn't mean there isn't anything you can do. And so if they haven't had their hearing checked, absolutely get it checked. The second biggest thing I see is stress.
Okay. Stress could be one of the major.
That stress response in the body. Yeah.
And
like I've had
Emily,
patients come in and go, yeah, I went on vacation. It just went away.
okay, that's right. So you kept hearing patient being told, just get used to it. What was going through your mind every time you saw that happening?
Unpopular opinion here. You just have to live with it is a terrible thing to say to a patient who is struggling with this. It's not completely wrong, though. So the problem comes in not teaching people how to live with it. How do I move forward alongside of this where it's not impacting my day-to-day life? How do I do that? But when you say to somebody, oh, you'll get used to it, you just got to live with it, it's incredibly dismissive. And they already oftentimes, if they're bringing it up, they're worried about it. They're wondering about it. They don't understand it. And it's a very dismissive way of handling that question because it doesn't have a simple answer. And that feeds that stress loop when you don't get a clear cut, well, this is what it is. This is what we need to be doing. There's no sense of empowerment that comes with, you just got to get used to it. You just got to live with it. There's no sense of hope. It's like telling somebody who's in chronic pain, you'll get used to it.
I have irritable bowel syndrome. I've been told nothing can be done, so just get used to it. Mine is very acute IBS, and I've got GORD at the same time, and I have to just live with it because I've been to many doctors across various locations, different countries. They said nothing can be done. Just get used to it. And I could totally resonate what you're talking right now. Emily, this is really not normal because many times doctors said, I have experienced it myself, just get used to it for something that never stops. So how do tinnitus and stress, because you spoke about stress being connected with the tinnitus, how tinnitus and stress actually feed each other? Is a two-way loop?
It is very much a back and forth sort of a thing. So
Okay.
what happens in the body, so we hear the tinnitus, we're like, I don't really want to listen to that. So what happens in the brain is the brain says, think about the brain having three different levels. So you have your lizard brain, which is where your fight or flight kind of lives, that fight or flight response. You have your midbrain, which is where the emotional brain is. And then you have your neocortex, your wizard brain, as I would call it.
Yeah.
And that's where all of that fabulous reasoning and higher thinking, the metacognition, thinking about our thoughts, all of that lives up there. So what happens when people experience their tinnitus is they hear it and they go, I don't understand what this is. I don't know what it is. The lizard part of the brain is a very primal response. And it's the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain.
Yeah.
And that sucker is on or it's off. There's no volume control. Think of it like a smoke alarm. If your house is on fire, the smoke alarm is going to go off. If you have burned the toast, the smoke alarm, if it's really sensitive, gets activated. And for a lot of people, that fear center of the brain gets overly activated when they hear the noise because it triggers the, I don't understand what this is. I need to monitor it. So it gets flagged as being important. And because it gets flagged as being important, it gets sent up to the wizard brain that says, okay, I'm going to monitor this now.
Okay.
And we monitor it. And so we're looping back in to check and see if it's still there. Yeah, it's still there. So we're feeding that loop of, annoyance, frustration, anger, fear, anxiety, whatever is going on around the tinnitus, and it feeds that loop. And when I work with my patients, I want to break the cycle in two ways. We have to first break it with sound. We need to give you that full picture of sound. So again, if you've got the hearing loss, you want to treat it, and you don't want to be in silence. Silence is no longer your buddy. You want to make sure you've got other things going on that you can listen to and pay attention to. And we can use sound in a wide variety of different ways. And a lot of people will do this intuitively. They're like, oh, yeah, if it's bugging me, I'll throw on my music, or I'll put on a podcast, or I'll throw on my fan at night. Like, a lot of people do this very intuitively. It's always interesting. And it's like you're actually doing a therapeutic thing for yourself.
Yep.
And it's always fun to illuminate that for them. But the second way to break it is dealing with that stress loop and that vigilance loop, so that people aren't staying so focused on it.
Emily, it's not just the sound causing the stress, it's the stress which is making the sound louder.
It's all
the
up in
loop.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah. Because it creates like an internal volume control.
And I want to pause here, right? Because I don't think enough people know about this. If you have someone in your life with hearing loss, share this clip with them. This could genuinely matter to them. Emily, is tinnitus under discussed in mainstream healthcare, and why?
Yes, it's nebulous and it's not straightforward. And while we know it's related to hearing loss, we know it's related to the stress response, and it can be related to all sorts of other things. Our ears are connected to our body. And so people who have diabetes, as an example, commonly also have hearing loss. So that should be being monitored. So it's important that in terms of those myths and misconceptions, this idea that there isn't anything you can do is so wrong. And it gets perpetuated. And I think because people feel like there isn't anything they can do online and things like that, I just see this group of people so preyed upon by people trying to do a quick get rich kind of a thing. And I would say if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And use your judgment there. But even though there's not a pill I can give you, even though there's not a simple instant kind of a thing, learning these skills of managing that lizard brain, managing that stress response, and regulating how that works can help tremendously in terms of how someone experiences tinnitus in their day-to-day life. It doesn't have to be so detrimental in their day-to-day life at all.
Yeah, because people think in being inferior in front of others if they have tinnitus, or they think they're nobody in front of others. So, Emily, because that is very serious problem right now, people not being very cautious and doesn't know more. So how does untreated hearing loss ripple out? First thing is relationship, second is work, third is mental health beyond just the ears. So what do you think? How it is?
When you're not able to hear, people tend to pull back. They tend to withdraw a little bit. And so behaviorally, what we might start to see is someone who says, oh, I can't be a part of that board or that organization because I can't hear in the meetings. Or I'm not going to go join that coffee group or that book club or that prayer group because it's too hard to hear. And they say, I'm just going to sit back and watch my family engage and interact. It makes me happy to see everybody, but in reality, they'd really like to be in the thick of it. So we see people pull back. We see people withdraw. We see a lot of smiling, a lot of nodding, a lot of, I have no idea what's going on right here. And because people don't want to look stupid, they hope that the smile and the nod is correct. In the workplace, it gets misconstrued as people who are being aloof or rude or harder to work with, not as smart because
arrogant.
They didn't catch what you said. Yeah, it gets misconstrued as all sorts of other things. And when people do tend to pull back and they do tend to withdraw, that can feed a sense of loneliness and depression. Most people communicate through sound. We communicate through the use of our voice. And when you can't hear, you are so much more isolated and alone feeling than you were in terms of being connected to someone else. I love hearing aids. I use them every day. They are not perfect. They're never going to be perfect. but they can make things so much better. And coming into that with realistic expectations, I think is important. When we have untreated hearing loss, the incidence of dementia, Alzheimer's, cognitive decline is higher when it's untreated. And it's one of the most modifiable things that someone can do to slow that process down, to delay that cognition changing. It's important that people understand, again, it's not a direct cause, but there's such high correlation. And it makes sense to me because if you're not getting out there, you're not engaging in the world, you're asking less of the brain. When you ask less of the brain, neurons that fire together, wire together, they assume they don't need to be there anymore. And you see how it can break down. Do puzzles to keep their brain sharp. Got to hear to keep out all of that wired together the way it's supposed to be.
Very well said. So, Emily, what I want to know is how does emotional intelligence play in how someone's response to a tinnitus diagnosis?
In terms of a tinnitus diagnosis, I think if you don't have good self-awareness, like you don't recognize your own way of handling a difficult thing or handling a stressful thing or recognizing where your own agency is, I think the emotional intelligence part really comes into play from the person explaining and giving the information. Because if they're not doing it in a way that helps that other person understand what is going on and where they have control and where they don't, so that they understand where that hope is, where their sense of empowerment can be. I think that's a bigger issue than the individual themselves having a lot of emotional intelligence. I do find that people who are emotionally intelligent do tend to give themselves a little bit more grace than someone who isn't.
That's right. I think we have the problem here, and we have the science behind why the standard response isn't enough. And now let's talk about what you built to fix that. SoundShift. I think, for audience, Emily, she didn't just identify the gap, she built the bridge. So, Emily, walk us through the moment you knew the world needed SoundShift. Was there a specific patient or experience that was the catalyst?
I think it was the culmination of years of watching people get relief from their amplification and sound, but not having the skills for when they're trying to go to sleep, not having the ability to regulate their own response. And just because we address the sound portion of it, we still have that neurological loop, that vigilance loop, that stress loop that's getting fed. And that has to be addressed in order for the brain to understand that it doesn't even need to flag it as important.
Okay.
Keep it in that really subcortical, so really far down that chain up in the brain for that emotional response. We want to keep it much further down. And when people aren't getting practical tools, ways, grounding exercises, and things like that to learn how to regulate that response, I think we're missing a huge part of what will make them ultimately feel better long term.
I've got two questions here, Emily. You did talk about SoundShift. I want to go deeper into it. So, what does SoundShift actually involve? That is the first one. Second question is, what does someone do inside this program?
So, it's very multifaceted. The program itself will be either 6 months or a year. I'm still trying to gauge how people are doing moving through it. It's very heavily concentrated with education at the front. So often it is easy to be afraid of something we don't understand. And so I want to make sure that people know what it is, what it isn't, like what's happening in the brain, what's happening in the ear, what's happening in the body. And then a lot of the program focuses on understanding the stress response, understanding the vigilance loop, understanding the thought processes and the maladaptive ways or the ways of thinking that are a little distorted, a little bit off. So language like always, never, very kind of overarching errors in thinking. Oh my gosh, I do think about it that way. That is the way that I talk about it, and unpacking what's behind that. Now, I'm not a therapist, I am a coach. And the way I would distinguish the two is a therapist is going to figure out how you got to that point. A coach is going to say, okay, I recognize this is where we are. How do we want to move forward? And that's the way I unpack those two things. It's important to me that people learn strategies to figure out how to move through it. So once we get through the education, we meet weekly as a group online, and we'll do some practical exercises. We do some kind of coaching through some of those maladaptive thoughts, those maladaptive ways of thinking. And it's interesting to see how that resonates with other individuals in there. And I think the groups are helpful because you're not alone, because a lot of times tinnitus being such a weird sort of nebulous thing and being so internal, you don't realize other people experience that too. So it can feel very isolating.
How is SoundShift different from traditional audio?
A lot of audiology, we will fit hearing aids. We will provide some sound therapy, but there's very little in the way of learning, how do I regulate my stress response? How do I practice the skills of self-compassion and giving myself some grace? How do I unpack these thoughts and these errors in ways of thinking? So we have lots of workbook activities, lots of downloadable meditations, things like that you can do. And most of them are, especially at the beginning, are very short. And the reason for that is because if you have somebody who is very dysregulated in terms of their stress response, telling somebody to sit and meditate for 20 minutes, not going to happen. They're going to feel like that is so far removed from what they're capable of doing that it just feeds that sense of hopelessness. Keeping them short is a very deliberate thing on my part, so that you build those little moments of success that can build on each other.
So can I put it in two ways? That traditional audiology for the tinnitus is you put a hearing aid. It's a machine that you put it in your ear.
It's a lot of education about what it is, what it isn't, a lot of treating the hearing loss, a lot of providing a good sound enrichment, all excellent things, all still need to be done. It's different because it's building the skills on the other side of it.
Yes.
So my hope is that this work will complement the work happening clinically.
I think it needs to complement and not to replace it. So Emily, you combine coaching, emotional intelligence, and cognitive flexibility. How do those three things work together in practice? What does a session actually look like?
The group sessions are an hour long, and most of the time I will open with a short meditation, a short grounding exercise, a little bit of teaching, a little bit of instruction. I want people to leave with as many tools as I can give them. Sometimes we will take the skills that are being learned throughout the program and spend a little time unpacking them in more depth. If they're sitting down by themselves to do one of the educational modules, the modules will run anywhere from 5 minutes up to around 20, just depending on the information that's in it.
Okay.
And a lot of them have workbook pages that are accompanied with it. Just about all of them do. And there are a lot of them that have a short meditation or short exercise to do with them as well. So there's a good amount of information and practical ways to practice it. Goal setting built around my coaching training. So the goals have nothing to do with measuring the tinnitus. I don't want to measure any of that. What I want to measure is how you're taking those small steps forward and what's working. And if it's not working for you and you feel like you're not able to meet the goal, what is the barrier that's holding you from even taking that step? A lot of times when we know where we want to go, it's good to have kind of that long-term thing, but that can feel really overwhelming. And so sometimes it's not even just taking the first step. Sometimes it's figuring out how to get your foot off the floor to take the first step, and breaking things down into the smallest little bits that they can control, that they can do for themselves, is one of the ways that we can help people really to move forward in a more positive and proactive way, as opposed to you got to just figure it out yourself. Flare up, they can recognize, okay, I recognize that this is a moment of discomfort. I know that this is a normal part of the way that the brain rewires itself. I know that I can do a grounding exercise right now. I know I can put some music on right now. I could put a good podcast on right now. I could call a friend and go for a walk. I have things
they could watch my podcast if they want.
And it gives them a way for them to say, okay, I can manage and respond in a different way versus that initial reaction of, oh my God, is this always going to be there? I'm never going to live like this. This is not okay with me. So it's helping them shift from that automatic millisecond reaction to one of a very intentional type of response. So the way that the body and the brain are responding are much more deliberate And the more that we practice those skills, and this is why the program is long, the more that we practice those skills and we have those times where we can come together, you can ask questions, you can get answers, we can talk to each other, you can try suggestions from other people. All of that ultimately long term gives them lots and lots of ways to say, okay, this is what works for me. So they get a blueprint at the end. Okay, I know that this skill works better for me than this skill, or I enjoy this, but I don't really enjoy that. This resonates with me, but this doesn't. And helping them understand what works for them in terms of regulating that response instead of me just brain dumping everything I think I know about tinnitus in my short sessions that I would have with my patients. And so it's a really nice way for us to watch and monitor and provide that scaffolding so that they ultimately have a better quality of life.
Can you share a story without naming anyone of a participant whose life genuinely shifted?
So I had a gentleman that I saw, this is before I even created this program, and I think he may have been part of what really wanted me to do it. He was a very cool guy, practicing Buddhist. So guy who meditated all the time. So silence for him was tantamount to necessary. He was also a therapist. And I would always talk to my patients at that time a lot about the practice of mindfulness and why that was so helpful. And, we would talk about, we could use all the jargon that goes along with a therapist, with cognitive distortions and all of that kind of stuff. So it was fun to nerd out with him. And for him, his son got married and the music that was at the reception was very loud. And he ended up being really close to one of the speakers and it caused some permanent damage in his ear. And we fit him with a hearing aid, but it was interesting. So my first session with him was very pleasant. As a therapist, he had a lot of language to describe how he was feeling, how it was impacting him. He was withdrawing. He was having a harder time engaging with his patients. He didn't want to hang out with his wife. His meditation practice itself wasn't as fruitful as it had been previously. And when he came back in for his fitting of his device, because we didn't fit people day of, we would order what was appropriate for them. And he comes in and he looks at me and he goes, I have to tell you, I am so angry right now because he has the tinnitus and now he has to get a hearing aid and he's got to deal with this. He was just angry. And so I put my hands on top of the desk and I said, okay, let's talk about that. And fully prepared if he didn't want to have the hearing aid that day. Ultimately, we walked through where he was emotionally, how he had gotten there. Just, I think he needed to unload a little bit of that and recognize that this is how he was feeling and own that. And I think for him, just having someone validate that it makes sense that you would be this upset because it's interrupting all these different areas of your life that are important to you. It makes sense that you would be upset about that. I think that skill of validating, it was just that validation that was real for him. So we did end up fitting him. By the time we were done, we worked around creating some strategies and plans and leaning into his own training as a therapist, looking at his own ways of thinking. Sometimes I think when we do what we do professionally, we forget that we can use those things for ourselves.
Yes.
And so it was helping him learn how to lean into those things for himself and remind him of those skill sets that he did have in his back pocket, and we could apply them here. And when we were finally done with everything and he was through his treatment phase and we were doing follow-ups 2 years later, it was just part of life. It was just in the background. It was no big deal. If he paid attention to it, he would hear it, but otherwise he just didn't even notice it. And he was just so clear in seeing that combination of not just the sound therapy, but the combination of it with these stress management tools. It was so clear to me that we need both.
You just spoke about that person having tinnitus, wanting to have validation. My next question is, why do people need validation, someone who's having tinnitus?
I think it's important when validation doesn't mean agreement. And I think that's very commonly misunderstood. Mm-hmm. So if I am validating that your experience, for example, with your IBS that you mentioned earlier, and the frustration perhaps that you experience around feeling like there's nothing you can do, if I were to say to you, it makes sense, Ravi, that you would experience a lot of stress around that, or a lot of anger or fear or anxiety, whatever the emotions are that you feel, because it when someone tells you there's nothing you can do, that's very unempowering. It
It
makes
is.
sense that you would respond that way. And just somebody saying that, your experience is valid for you. Now, whether I agree with what was told to you, whether I agree with the way you responded, makes no difference. But recognizing
To
that person's
sympathize with
experience
that
brings to
person,
them.
can I say that?
I think empathy is feeling with someone. And then I think of compassion as I'm going to feel this with you, but how do we take the next step forward? And if we can lean in with more compassion and actionable ways to move forward with that layer of empathy right behind it, I think people could do so much more.
And how long does someone typically work through SoundShift before they notice a real change? What is the duration?
The program is brand new, so we're still in its kind of beta phase. It's sort of founder's phase. So the program, I have it right now at a year. It may be 6 months with little follow-ups. We're going to do a little follow-up, in 2 or 3 months, just as a little reminder. So those kinds of things I'm still working through. How they handle their tinnitus, how that kind of habituation process works is different for everybody. And I will tell you, it's not an overnight thing. Nothing
Okay.
neurologically is overnight. It'll be anywhere from 6 months to a year for sure. But again, it's super early in its creation. And so I don't know exactly how long all of that will take. But I know that people do experience the biggest shifts at the beginning, because that's when we're dealing the most with that very, very dysregulated emotional system. As we move further in is when they're not having those strong emotional reactions and we're not using these skills and strategies and sound therapy for handling those emotional reactions, and we're doing them for things that are a little further down neurologically in terms of creating that really lasting impact so that the brain isn't flagging it as important and we're keeping it at that sub level in the brain. Those things take a lot of reassurance, you got to keep going. I know it feels like nothing is happening, but you got to keep moving forward. And one analogy that a very dear friend shared with me in terms of creating that neurological response, in terms of persisting and feeling like, okay, nothing is happening here anymore. Why do I have to keep going? She describes it as painting lines on a road. So if you have a bucket and the bucket is cemented to the
Yeah.
road, but your job is to paint the lines. And so at the beginning, it's really easy to see how far you went because the bucket is reasonably close and you feel like you're always making progress. As the line gets longer, the trips back to the bucket take a lot longer. And even though you're making progress, it's not as visible as it was at the beginning. And so as the brain is rewiring itself, that's a lot of what's happening. Those surface changes are so small and so minute. And over time, there's cumulative benefit, but it takes the
Time.
consistency of doing it in order for those things to get really cemented in. But the changes are going to be little, and keeping people recognizing that, yes, you're making change. Yes, there's improvement happening, even if you're not feeling it, is one of the reasons that I'm like, do I continue to push through or not? And so I'm still figuring that out. Again, with the program
That
being so new.
is very well said. I like the example that the analogy
I
about
stole
painting the
that from a
lines.
very dear, very much smarter woman than me.
Emily, you build something genuinely new for patients, but you also work on the other side of the clinical relationship with the providers themselves. Let's go there. Healthcare systems. So, for anyone who
Mhm.
isn't familiar, what is motivational interviewing and what does it matter so much in a clinical setting?
Motivational interviewing does not mean I'm going to give you motivation by talking to you and asking questions. That's
All
not
right.
motivational interviewing. The purpose of motivational interviewing, so in my work, it requires a change in behavior to put a hearing aid on every day, to be willing to deal with all of the nonsense that goes on with wearing a hearing aid every day, whether you're sweaty or you take your hat off and it flops off the top of your ear. There are little things that just come with the day-to-day use of doing it. But my work requires a change in your behavior to make it successful. And depending on where you live, it may require some financial outlay as well. And so motivational interviewing works to figuring out where those barriers are. What are the thought processes that you have that are inhibiting you from taking the steps that you probably know you need to take? What's holding you back?
Yeah.
Why are those there? And is that how you want to be responding? And creating a partnership relationship to move forward in a way that gets you where you ultimately do want to go. But motivational interviewing is really about unpacking those barriers and not trying to fix them, but trying to understand them and figuring out is this something that you want to hold on to? Is this not something that you want to hold on to? Why are you believing what you believe? Because, our brains make up all sorts of stories all the time, and our brains are fabulous storytellers, but we don't have to believe everything we think. And going through that motivational interviewing process, going through learning how to ask questions, learning how to validate that someone's experience is real. When my dad got hearing aids, he wouldn't wear them. I don't want to do that to my family or friends, or he wouldn't wear them because he said they wouldn't work. There's preconceived notions there. There are assumptions that are coming into play, and unpacking some of that can help people to take the step forward that they need to take. I assume if somebody is sitting in my office, even just for a hearing test, that they're assuming something is not okay because they're in my office. So I assume they are ready to do the change. I come in with that assumption. And that's not always where they're at. And motivational interviewing helps to meet people where they are so that we can take the next steps forward instead of me assuming that I know what's important to you. The things that I think are important might not really matter to you.
That's right.
So it takes you out of the equation as a provider with your own preconceived notions, your own expectations.
So now, Emily, you've seen burnout up close in healthcare settings. What do you think this is the single biggest driver of it?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. In my industry, we have too much focus on the widget and not enough on the care provided surrounding the widget. It was an interesting article around, we don't really have a auditory health program, in my field. Getting that kind of education out there, I think, is an important thing. But so much pressure comes from maximizing output in a clinic. And oftentimes people, they come into this field because they want to help people. And they get into a position and feel like all I'm asked to do and how good I am at my job is equated to I sold X number of units. Or they don't have enough time, and there's a lot of pressure to be more and more efficient in the office, coupled with the reimbursement rates that are so low. So there's so many different things. And then we don't have good skills always ourselves to manage and regulate our own response. And when you're acting with empathy with someone else and you're listening to them talk about things that are hard, because it's not easy to be disconnected. It's not easy, rather, to go to a doctor's office and say, I'm not okay. And you as a provider, take that in, especially if you're very empathetic. And you have to have a way to get rid of that and deal with that. And so it can be very cumulative and very draining. And you as a provider are always okay.
So you spoke about the skills. What I want to know is, what's one thing most healthcare providers do in patient conversation that quietly makes things worse without even realizing it?
They go through a checklist in their head without asking open-ended questions because they're so driven by time and they're trying to be efficient. They don't always listen to the answers. So they're not digging always where they need to dig because they have this checklist in their mind.
I think that is what people need to think about, think about every medical appointment you have ever left feeling dismissed. And I think this is a reason for that.
The provider is under a lot of pressure to stay on time, to bill the right amount of stuff, to make sure everything is correct. And they have their own agenda for coming into the appointment. And the patient has their own agenda coming into the appointment. And those two things don't often align. They should, but they don't often align. And it's easy, I see a provider of any kind, to forget that's a human being on the other side of the table. And, to just trying to give them a little bit of grace in the whole thing as well. Because I do see it from both sides.
And you've dedicated your career to changing the system from the inside. But also, you made a very personal to step outside the systems entirely. Let's talk about that now, Emily.
COVID sort of did me in clinically. The way that people responded during the pandemic with masks and misinformation and all of the I don't know how it was elsewhere in the world, but in my world, there was a great sense of entitlement. People were a lot ruder. They weren't as kind. And that did me in. And then when I went through my coaching training, I realized that I wasn't necessarily aligning what I was doing every day with what I wanted long term. And I was in a role where I got to split my time. So I was half clinical and half sort of developing programs, mentoring, coaching providers to help improve their care in the office. But they asked me to be in the clinic 5 days a week. And I said, and I was just about finished with my coaching certification. I said, this is not, if I'm in 6 months doing this, I don't want to do that. And we had set ourselves up financially, my husband and I, so that I could take this step. And I am so grateful for his support. And I'm so grateful for all the things that I've learned. I am grateful for the ways that I have failed because I've gotten smarter. I'm grateful for the connections that I have made with other audiology nerds and other like-minded individuals that want to put a different message out there. But I wanted to take my clinical work and apply it differently to create the thing that I wish I always had when I was in the office.
You also listed starting a business as your biggest challenge. What specifically about it surprised you the most?
I think how many hats you have to wear and how much time it takes to do the marketing. I have no business background whatsoever. My background is all clinical. And I think the business stuff is super interesting, but I don't have that background. And so I am very much learning as I go. How long things take to do has been a huge surprise. I had some pretty unrealistic expectations for how long it took to create the things. So it's been interesting just how many different hats you have to wear, things that I know how to do now that I didn't know how to do before. Build a website, create newsletters, conferences, and things like that. Yeah, just so many different things. But the marketing piece of things and the sheer number of different hats that you wear has been really interesting.
I think you've been very upfront and honest. So thank you for being honest about that, because most people only share the highlight reel. They don't talk about the failures. They talk about what they're good at and what they have done. So thank you for being so honest here. All right. So Emily, you've presented at Audiology conference and built a coaching practice.
That was very fun.
So two very different rooms. How do you handle imposter syndrome when you're showing up in spaces that feel completely different from each other?
I just like my motto, just do it scared, do it anyway. Your mind is connected to your body. And when I was getting ready to present, one of the things I will always do when I'm getting ready to stand in the front of the room, I do some different breathing techniques. But when I am presenting, when I am nervous, I will, like even right now, I'm sitting very upright. But when I was presenting at the convention, I make sure to stand very straight and have my feet firmly grounded. I know that I have rehearsed a lot. I know I've got that muscle memory. I think you just have to do it scared. Most audiences, honestly, are pretty forgiving. And they're there because they're interested in what you have to say. Like where my presentation was at the conference I was just at, it was my first national audiology conference I presented at. The room was not easy to get to. I was at end of the day in the middle of a conference. Nobody was coming by accident. So when you can stand physically in your own power, it tells your brain, okay, you feel okay. And nervousness and excitement register the same. So if you can reframe it a little bit, that helps as well. And doing the breathing exercises to calm that physiologic nervousness sort of sensation helps tremendously. So all of those things together for me are what helps me to overcome that imposter sort of feeling. I still have it. I still feel like there are smarter people out there. There's always going to be a smarter person than me out there. I want to learn from you. I'm going to steal from you. And I am a big believer that a rising tide raises all ships. And if I can impart some knowledge or we can share some knowledge together, you're going to walk back into the clinic and feel more confident. The patients are going to get a better experience. Everything is improved. And so I operate from that mindset. So if you leave feeling more empowered, feeling smarter, then in my mind, that's better for the field as a whole.
So very well said, Emily. What's the most counterintuitive lesson entrepreneurship has taught you about yourself?
I am more resilient than I thought I was. I know what I don't want to do. And the only way to get where I want to go is to keep trying and just to keep picking myself up and going, okay, that didn't work. What can we try differently next time? And reframing a quote unquote failure as a learning opportunity. One of the things that when I went through my coaching training, they talked about you have a problem rock. Back of the problem is a solution.
Solution.
Yeah.
I think everyone needs to
And
have it.
so,
I need to have that as well.
yeah, I love my little problem solution rock, and I have it right here on my desk. It's always readily available. And it's a reframe of how you respond. They talk about different types of energy. So it's not a destructive kind of energy, it's a broadening, it's a more open, growth oriented mindset. And when you can move forward with that, sky's the limit on what you can do and become. I have days that are harder than others, but
Yeah,
it is what it
this
is.
is
And
what it shows.
yeah.
For every problem, there is a solution. That is what we need to go and seek for it, because unless and until we go and look for it, we are not going to get it. Emily, your
Mhm.
mantra is do it scared. How do you actually act when you're scared? And when does that look like in practice for you?
There's a woman that I have kind of LinkedIn friends with, and I saw that she was presenting at this convention that I was just at. So I've never met her in person prior to the event.
Okay.
And so doing it scared, I'm not one who wants to put myself out there necessarily. So this is super against my own personality. But I reached out and I said, I'm a fan. I love the work that you're doing. I would love to meet you in person. Are you open to getting a cup of coffee? So that's one example of just doing it scared, extending the hand out and seeing what happens. It's signing up to see if they'll accept your talk. It's putting out a video on YouTube that has information that someone might find valuable. It's doing the things that make you uncomfortable because that's where the growth is. If I were to stay comfortable in what I did every day, I would never grow. I would never become a better version of myself. I would never tap into or find strengths that I didn't know were there. And so do it scared just means that, okay, I'm not necessarily super comfortable here, but I'm going to do it anyway and see what happens. And not all of it will be met with success. Not all of it will be met with, oh yeah, I would totally like to get together, or no, I don't really have time. Like I can't control any of that, but I can control the way that I choose to put myself forward. And I think just doing it scared means you're just going to keep doing that. Keep putting yourself out there, keep putting yourself in situations, networking situations. When I was at the convention, I just walking the floor talking to people that I don't know in the expo hall, very out of my comfort zone, but I did it anyway.
I think people need to start somewhere, and that right moment is right now. Okay, before we land the plane, Emily, I want to get to know the person behind all of this work, and that's you. All right, so you're a reader, a cook, an artist, a traveler. Which of those hobbies most directly feeds your professional thinking?
Probably travel in the sense that it opens me up to experiences that are not mine. And I think reading as well. Reading is probably right up there too. I think it's important to read things that are out of your own experience, like things that will expose you to a different idea, a different way of thinking, something that's going to make you go, I'd never thought about it that way. Whether it's a fiction book and you're reading about a character that is completely different from you, or it's a nonfiction book where you're exposed to a new idea. I think reading probably, because it opens my mind to a different experience and helps me to recognize that, and this again, where validation is important, that my experience doesn't mean it's yours. And
Exactly.
it helps me to have a little bit more empathy for what someone else has gone through, even if I haven't, and
And
recognize that we were traveling, we were in Costa Rica, and some of the homes are nowhere near what Americans would consider a normal standard of living. And I love that my daughter sees that kind of stuff and recognizes that not everybody lives in a nice house in suburbia here in the Denver area. That's not the way the world works. And I love that she sees that. And I think reading offers a similar kind of a thing where you can transport yourself to a time or a place or a character that's so different from you. Just get curious.
Yeah, curious. That's the word. Yeah, you should be curious. Everyone should be curious. And you spoke about the traveling. Soon you're going to celebrate your 25th wedding anniversary. I think it's Italy or Greece. I'm not sure, but congratulations. First thing.
Thank you.
Second thing is, what does travel teach you that no book or course can?
I am so excited. We're going to Turkey, and I'm so excited. I know it's a little bit commercial, but I'm excited to walk through the Turkish market and see what that feels like and to smell the things that are there and the language that's so different from my own. And the colors are so different from what I'm used to. I'm looking forward to that. I'm the same kind of richness and texture that's in Italy with the history and the length of time that those buildings have been there. And there's just so much to learn and so much to see. And I'm excited to do all of that. I'm excited to experience those things in person. And I think time away for me, travel is very relaxing. And you absolutely have to take time away from work, away from the stuff that you do every day to make you more effective when you're there.
How many
Because if you never take a
countries
break,
you have traveled so far?
I have been all over the Caribbean, but in Europe, I have been to the UK and I've been to Iceland. And this trip, we're going to go to Italy, Greece, and Turkey. And I'm very looking forward to it.
And if you could have one conversation with yourself at the very start of your career, what would you say?
Continue to learn and continue to grow.
Personal growth is one of your deepest passion. What is the most important inner shift you have made in the last 2 years?
A willingness to give myself grace, a willingness to be more compassionate with myself.
Failure never made a negative impact on you. It was something that made you more stronger and made you a better person.
And I think having that shift comes with that compassion of it's okay if it didn't work. And what did you learn? And how do you want to move forward?
All right, last two questions, and I think these are the ones that really land. So here it is, Emily. If someone listening right now is struggling with tinnitus or supporting a loved one who is, what is the one thing you most want them to take away from today?
That there is hope and we can help you with tools and strategies to improve your overall quality of life as well as your own experience of tinnitus. Take a breath and you're okay. And we're going to help you through the process. Please go get your hearing checked.
Emily, where can people find you, follow your work, and learn more about SoundShift? In the
It's on my
description.
Seeds of Insight coaching page. The name of my company is Seeds of Insight. And the reason for that is I don't believe change can happen without that moment of insight. You need to have those moments of awareness, insight before you have moments of change and moments of growth. There's a page there for tinnitus support tools that has several different sections in it for the days when it's hard, the days when your thoughts are running away from you, your sleep. There's a number of different tools in there. And I think that gives a really nice flavor. And the link to enroll in the course is at the bottom.
So people wanting to know more about this, there will be a link in the description regarding the website, the LinkedIn, and some other information. So please do check that out in the description. So thank you, Emily, for coming on the podcast and sharing all this information with our viewers. And thanks for your time.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Ravi.
What I want you to take from this conversation is suffering is not the only option, and get used to it is not a clear plan. If today's episode was value to you, do 3 things. Subscribe, because we do this every week. Share this with one person who needs to hear it. I'm Ravi Athale, and this has been Ravi Athale Perspective. I'll see you next week. Bye.